I have dermatomyositis. That is the disease that I mentioned in the video a little while ago and have mentioned a few times over the last 2-ish years. It's the thing that took me off YouTube for a while. It's the thing that took me out of really doing anything for a while. And I've mentioned it a few times. I've made a few videos where I talked about it, but I've never really sat down and talked about what happened with it. I was never really, I feel like, mentally prepared to talk about it because of how badly it affected me. I have gotten better to the point, though, that I think I can talk about it now. I didn't want to be making this video right this minute. I had a different video that I'd already written a script for and recorded audio for and started editing, but I had another trip to the ER somewhat suddenly a few days back, and luckily it wasn't fully related to my disease, but it sort of put a damper on everything, and it sort of made my mood more negative, and I just didn't want to keep working on that video at the time. I've decided instead I'd rather make this video and talk about it. Dermatomyositis is a autoimmune disease, a rheumatological autoimmune disease specifically. It attacks the joints and the muscles. It's very similar to lupus. If you know anything about lupus, it comes with a facial rash the same way that lupus does. Dermatomyositis, the dermato part being skin related, comes with other possible skin lesions, rashes on the elbows, the hands, the knees, the back, the chest. I only got the one on the face. But other than that, it very specifically attacks muscles and joints in the body. When it presented originally for me, it was back in late March of 2022. It was my shoulder. I had a pain that appeared in my right shoulder somewhat out of nowhere. And it wasn't awful at first. It was just shoulder pain, muscle soreness. I thought maybe I had tweaked it somehow. Maybe I slept on it wrong. Maybe I overexerted myself at work. However, as the days went by, it progressed to being just pain in one shoulder to pain in both shoulders and then pain in both arms. And it got so bad that I couldn't work. I couldn't function really. At one point, I was literally in so much pain, I was just on the ground crying because I could not move my arms or anything without just an unbelievable amount of pain. And that resulted in a few different trips, not to the ER, but instead to health clinics, just to see a doctor as quickly as I possibly could. But unfortunately, dermatomyositis is not a disease that is easily tested for. And because I was just essentially having muscle pain, and because I was unfortunately unaware that the rash on my face was a rash and not just a sunburn that I thought I was getting from walking out in the sun to and from work so much, no one thought to check for it for a few weeks. And then what prompted a visit to the hospital was actually an instance where I had, during this entire time with the shoulder pain and the arm pain, I was also starting to develop issues swallowing. It was just a little bit harder to eat food, I'd noticed. And one day over the weekend, I had went to take a drink of water and I swallowed it a little wrong, and it caused me to start wheezing and choking in a way that I'd never felt before. And that scared me a lot. I didn't think at the time that it was related to my shoulder pain because I had no reason to believe that. But because I still had the shoulder pains and now I had something else, I decided I would go back to the health clinic and talk to a doctor about it. When I went to the health clinic that day, early that morning, like Monday morning, um, the doctor I was seeing when I was starting to talk about this noticed that my arms were swelling. And the combination of the swelling arms plus the arm pain plus the facial rash made him believe that I had something along the lines of lupus. Um, and because that can attack the lungs, it can be if like it can be very dangerous if not caught early. They sent me for X-rays right then and there at the clinic, and then they sent me to the hospital to try and test for other things, for MRIs, for things I couldn't do at such a small clinic. I ended up at the hospital, at the time, fully believing that whatever was wrong with me was now going to get properly dealt with. They were going to figure out what it was. They were going to give me the medications I need for it, the treatments I needed for it, and I was going to get better. I ended up spending 5 or 6 days, I don't remember how many days exactly, in the hospital as they tested for things, and every day that they tested for things, I got worse. The first night I was in the hospital, I had not eaten anything that day. From the morning I went to the hospital to when I finally got admitted into a room later that night at around 9 p.m., I had not eaten anything. And I asked for something. They brought me just puddings, like little things that they thought, little things that they could get me quickly. And even then, I was struggling to eat them. Something so simple. And I couldn't move my arms super well due to the swelling, so I had to be helped with that. The next morning, when I woke up, my arms had swelled further, as had my hands, to the point where I could not move my arms at all. And I had basically no movement in my fingers as well. My arms had become completely unusable. And over the course of the next 5 days, because the disease I have is so difficult to test for, you can't simply do blood tests for it. Every test that they did on me came back clean. I was not sick according to every test I got. That frustrated me quite a lot, as you can imagine. And on top of that, I saw a speech therapist probably on the second or third day I was there, and I spoke to them about my swallowing issues. And they believed because I had the mild choking incident that I was having a psychosomatic response. Like I was afraid to swallow, basically, is what they believed. Because I was afraid to choke again. So they did a swallow study. They told me my swallow function was very poor, and so I should be on soft foods. But they believed I could still eat. And they were sending me food every day, and I was not capable of eating it when they sent it to me. So this entire time I'm in the hospital, I'm not eating anything. I'm being told there's nothing wrong with me. I can't sleep because I'm in, constant pain, and also it is a hospital. It's loud. It is cold. It's awful, right? I think it was the fourth day I was there. They got a hold of a rheumatologist who told me they believed, based on my symptoms, I had myositis, specifically dermatomyositis. Unfortunately, it's not something, as I said, that you can just test for. It requires DNA testing. You have to look for specific DNA markers. So they took my blood. They sent it off to a lab that was going to take at least a month to get that information back. And they started getting ready to discharge me. Like I said, it was either the 5th or the 6th day, because there was nothing else they could really do for me. And because they believed I could be adequately cared for at home, they sent me home. Still, I should point out as well on the soft foods diets. I got home and I made an appointment with an ears, nose, and throat specialist to talk about my swallow issues because I thought, again, at this point, I still thought it was something completely separate. And then I made an appointment with the rheumatologist to talk to him about the disease. It was about 2 weeks later that I got the appointment with the rheumatologist, that I got to see the rheumatologist. And when I got there and he started explaining the disease, it sort of was that moment that it occurred to me that I was not going to be okay for a very long time. At this point, while I had been in the hospital, I should say this, while I was in the hospital, it was only my arms that had been affected by the disease. They were painful, they were swollen, they were like basically unusable. But while I was in the hospital, I did notice over time that my legs, specifically like my quads, my thighs, were starting to feel a little sore and were feeling a little weaker. And I was at the time, because how much everything was happening in my arms and everything was being attacked in the arms, assuming that that was just because I was lying down for 5 days straight. But over the course of the next few weeks, up until I reached the rheumatologist, it occurred to me that no, I was starting to lose my legs as well. So when I sat down at the rheumatologist and he told me it'll probably be a year to 2 years before you're even at a semblance back to normal, not full strength, just some level of normal, that is when it really hit me just how bad things were going to be. And to make matters worse, a few days later, I got to see the ears, nose, and throat specialist, and I had a camera shoved down my throat, and I was told that I have literally zero swallow function. It is not safe for me to eat or drink anything. I need to be on a feeding tube. So over the course of the next 6 weeks, the next day, the next day, I had the feeding tube put in. I was back in the hospital. I had what is called an NG tube put in, which is a very thin feeding tube that goes up your nose into your stomach. And that is how I received all nutrition for the next 6 weeks, while my body continued to deteriorate. I went from being able to walk fine to walk, but it tired me out, to basically unable to walk at all. I went from my arms are just in pain when I use them to my arms are in pain and swollen to my arms are in pain and swollen and I cannot use them at all. And I went from it is hard to eat to I cannot eat. And that affected me greatly. I need to really, really hammer this point home. From the Monday I went into the hospital, to 3-ish weeks later, when I finally saw the ears, nose, and throat specialist, I had eaten basically nothing. I want to say maybe a cup of mashed potatoes over the course of like a week that I had to just slowly work at, and maybe 1 or 2 glasses of water, again, that took multiple days each to have. And I had lost a tremendous amount of weight. I had lost all of my muscle mass because it had just been attacked and destroyed by my disease. I lost the ability to use my arms. I lost my ability to use my legs. I could not do anything. I could not eat. I could not sleep. I could not take care of myself. And it all culminated in being told it's not going to get better for a very long time. And you cannot eat or drink anything. You need a feeding tube, and we do not know how long it's going to be, maybe forever. I got the feeding tube put in, and over the course of 6 weeks, it caused an incredible amount of issues. Using it caused me to have nausea, hot flashes, headaches, dizziness. But I couldn't not use it. It was the only thing at this point keeping me alive. And I had to be on it basically the entire day, because the way a feeding tube works is it just slowly feeds the formula through the tube into my stomach, but it was so slow because of how many issues it was causing me that literally to get the amount of nutrition I needed to live, I had to be on it from basically the moment I woke up to the moment I went to bed. On top of all of this, I had to on top of all of this, I had to get in contact with medical professionals and specialists to try and help deal with the swelling in my arms, the incredible muscle weakness, figure out a road plan for when I might be able to start physical therapy. My physical therapy started with literally just squeezing my hand, and that was it, because I needed to regain movement in my fingers, basically. Um, at this time as well, basically everything that could go wrong was going wrong. My insurance was either not approving or canceling appointments that I absolutely needed to live. Um, the rheumatologist office canceled multiple appointments for an infusion that I needed of immunosuppressors to try and get the disease under control. Um, I get this infusion twice a year, and it comes in two parts each time. So the first infusion, I get the first part, and then 2 weeks later I get the second part, and then the next infusion, which happens 6 months later, again same thing. I get the first part, and then 2 weeks later I get the second part. For the first infusion that I got after this disease had just started destroying my body, and it was the most important thing in the world to me at this time because I needed something to help try and get this under control. It was 37 days between each part of the infusion. Um, and keep in mind at this point, I can't get any answers on whether or not this is going to affect how much it helps me or if it is going to help me at all. I'm going through the worst experience in my life. Everything is going wrong, and no one can help me. Is basically what was happening. Um, and then by the time I finally get that second part of the infusion, I'm now multiple weeks into having this feeding tube, which is also causing me incredible problems. Um, 6 weeks into having this feeding tube, which was actually the longest I could possibly have this type of feeding tube, I spoke to my ears, nose, and throat specialist and said, I need it. I just need it gone. But I can't live, obviously, without it. So I had to have a feeding tube surgically implanted into my stomach. And two days later, I'm in the hospital again. And I have the NG tube removed, and I have a PEG tube placed into my stomach surgically. And that's how, for the next year, I got all of my nutrition. I did not regain the ability to eat for an entire year. I don't have the time or I think the mental fortitude to explain everything that happened over the course of that year and every single thing that went wrong. But things went bad. They went very bad. Um, but the entire time everything went bad, I did what I was told I need to do to get better. I did physical therapy at home when literally all I could do was squeeze a stress ball or lift a like 3 ounce weight. Um, when I got okayed to when I believed I was physically capable enough of just walking around the block maybe 5 months after everything started, I would take walks literally just down the street and back, and it would tire me out to a level you can't possibly imagine. I used to hike up mountains, and it was easier than doing this. I went I did every speech exercise that I was told to do just to try and regain some ability to eat or drink anything, literally anything, to get me off of the feeding tube. The new feeding tube I had was so much better than the old one, but it was still awful, and it was still causing problems, and it was still sort of just emblematic of everything that I had lost over the course of the last few months. And I just hated it more than I could possibly imagine, more than I could possibly explain. And over the course of months of doing these speech exercises, I would do swallow studies just to be told that I have regained zero function. Nothing has improved. And I started outpatient speech therapy where I went to a medical office and I had electrodes placed on my throat where they would shock me for half an hour at a time just to try and stimulate the muscles 3 times a week. Trying to regain any ability. Only to once again every month see that there had been no improvement. In numbers, in real time, I got to see that I was not improving. When my insurance would no longer cover a nurse going to my home for physical therapy, and I started having to go to the same building, actually, that I went to speech therapy for physical therapy, I got to multiple times a week for months at a time just fail over and over and over again at even the simplest of exercises because I just wasn't improving. I got to see in real time not just how bad I had become, but how I wasn't improving. And it just destroyed me mentally. But I kept going. Every week I went multiple times for speech and for physical therapy. I did not miss a single appointment unless it was one of the many times I wound up in the hospital again for something else. During this period, I developed gallstones, despite the fact that I wasn't eating food. I had nothing but a nutrient-rich formula that got poured directly into my stomach and nothing else. And yet still I developed gallstones. And I had to live with those gallstones for many more months than I probably should have had to, because after my first initial diagnosis of gallstones, I had a second diagnosis where they told me, no, it's actually something else, something that will go away on its own. Another incredibly rare disease that I'm not even going to talk about because it's so unbelievably rare that literally none of my doctors had ever even heard of it. So I got to live for 4 months with just some of the worst stomach pain I'd ever experienced as well before that got dealt with. But I still went. Even on days where I had to go to the emergency room because the pain was so bad that I was afraid something had gone so horribly wrong that with my disease, that I just needed immediate medical attention. If I got home before my appointments, I went to my appointments, because if years down the line I still couldn't walk, or I still couldn't use my arms, or I still couldn't eat, I was never going to let anyone say it was because I didn't do what I needed to do to try and get it fixed. It was never going to be my fault. It was about a year after everything had first presented, late April 2023, when I first managed to eat something again. I I had done a swallow study in June. No, not in June. I'm sorry, in January, at the beginning of the year. A full 8+ months since everything had started, and I was once again told that there was literally no improvement. And over the course of the next few months, that that particular diagnosis took an incredible toll on me. But over the course of the next few months, I continued to do what I was told. I continued to go to my speech therapy. I continued to do my exercises at home. One day in April, just everything got the better of me. And I just asked for food. I said, just give it to me. Give me anything. Give me anything solid. And I was given just the most generic saltine crackers you could ever imagine, and a glass of water. At this point, I had sort of tricked my throat into letting me drink water. I still didn't really have a swallow function for it that worked properly, but I could do it. But I could not swallow any food. And I I I bit into the cracker, and I can honestly say it was probably the most cathartic feeling I'd had in a very long time. Just the taste of salt. And that's it. And I attempted to swallow it, and I failed. It just got stuck in my throat. And I kept trying and I kept trying. I couldn't get it down. So finally, I took a drink of water, and it forced some of it down. And then I took another drink of water, and it forced some more of it down. And then I did the same thing with the other cracker. And then I asked for more food, and I asked for more water. And over the course of the next few weeks, that is what I did. I forced myself to eat. I forced food into my throat, and then I forced it into my stomach by drinking water to make it go down. And I kept doing that. And I just kept doing it, and I kept doing it, and I kept doing it, and I kept finding new foods to eat, new flavors to have that I hadn't had in over a year. And eventually, it stopped being just a piece of fruit or a cracker or yogurt or something, and eventually it became a real meal. I had a sandwich made, and I brought it with me, And over the course of an hour, I slowly but surely ate the entire thing. And I ate it by cheating, I tell people. I couldn't swallow it, but I could force it down. And I wasn't choking, and I wasn't blocking my airway, and it was going from my mouth to my stomach. And the first thing I did after I left speech therapy that day was I drove to my father's house, who lives not that far from where the speech therapist, the entire physical and speech therapy building is, and I told him, and I cried because I had eaten a meal for the first time in over a year. And that moment is where things finally started to improve. The ability to eat seemed to bring with it the ability to regain some amount of strength. I started improving in physical therapy. I started moving from 1 to 2 pound weights to 4 to 5 pound weights, which is not a lot of weight, mind you, but for me it was. I went from 2 minutes on a treadmill to 10 minutes on a treadmill. I went from not even being able to complete an entire day's worth of physical therapy without literally collapsing in exhaustion to making it through an entire regimen and still being able to go home and enjoy other things that day. It took an entire year, but I started to improve. Since then, I've improved more. Um, there are still a few things, usually starchy things, potatoes or bread, that are a little harder for me to eat, a little harder for me to swallow. Still might require a sip of water here and there. Um, but for the most part, I can still just eat on my own. My swallow function is still not completely normal, and it's still not back to 100%. But I can eat on my own. I can take care of myself again. If I fall on the ground, I can get up. I can lift reasonably weighted things. I'm still not strong enough to lift anything with particular heft. But if I need to move something small, like a small piece of furniture, I can at least do it with no small amount of strain. Um, but I cannot stress just how much of a toll last year took on me. I I can't think about how that last year had been without it putting me in a very dark place. I uh, I spent multiple months unable to sleep. Just the pain, the constant pain throughout my body, combined with the fact that I couldn't even manage my own saliva. I would cough and choke just by trying to swallow what my body naturally produced. I would sit in bed awake the entire night, just waiting for someone else in the house to wake up because I didn't have the power to get myself out of the bed. I would spend an entire day just sitting alone, suffering in pain, waiting for someone to help me in bed so I could sit in bed alone in darkness until someone woke up to help me do it all again. So when I say that the ability to eat and the ability to walk and the ability to use my arms literally saved my life, I cannot understate how important it was to me. And I cannot overstate just how bad I feel and I felt when everything was happening. So that brings us to my most recent ER trip. Um, after after June, which is when I finally got the feeding tube out of my stomach, I didn't have any hospital visits. I didn't have any ER visits. I still had a lot of medical visits, a lot of visits to various specialists and various doctors. Um, but I did not end up in the ER or the hospital at all. It finally felt like for the first time my disease was starting to come under control. And then a few days after Christmas, somewhere towards the end of the night, somewhere around 11 p.m., I don't remember which day specifically, um, I started feeling pain in my left shoulder. And it was a dull sort of like muscle ache pain. And that particular day, I had spent with my girlfriend cleaning the house and moving things that were probably a little bit more heavy than I should be moving. So I was worried, but I wanted to hope it was just muscle weakness, muscle soreness. And then the next day, it had gotten worse. It had started to hurt more. My range of motion was pretty bad. I could lift my left arm, elbow, probably about, you know, parallel to my shoulder, but that was it. I couldn't lift my arm higher than that, and at that point, I started to worry. So I was like, okay, tomorrow I need to go to my rheumatologist, and I need to talk about to him about this. I need to see about getting some blood work. I need to see if something is happening, right? I need to be on this as fast as possible. And then that night, it got even worse. While I was in bed, it just got so bad I couldn't sleep. I was in so much pain. And about 6 in the morning, I finally just got up, and while everyone was still asleep, I just drove to the hospital. I drove to the ER. And at this point, my arm is so bad, I can't even lift my left arm at all. I have no range of motion whatsoever. And I get to the ER, and I talk to a doctor and explain everything. They're like, okay, we're gonna take blood work, we're gonna take an X-ray, and I gave them the number to my rheumatologist, and they said they were gonna call my rheumatologist. And for the first time in multiple months, I'm suddenly terrified again. Because for all this time between when I woke up and when the doctor came back, I don't know what's going on. And I'm just mentally right back where I was a year and a half ago at this point. I am terrified, just horrified that I'm not going to be able to use my arm again. That I'm not going to be able to walk again, that I'm not going to be able to eat again. And the doctor comes back, and he tells me I have calcification in the joint of my left shoulder causing tendinitis, which I really would like to just reiterate isn't good, but despite the incredible amount of pain my shoulder is in and the fact that I can't move my left arm at all right now, somehow that just lifts a tremendous weight off of my chest. My blood work came back good. My disease is still under control. But for those few hours, it wasn't. For those few hours, everything was back. And that's how we ended up here. For the record, they prescribed me steroids to get inflammation down in my shoulder. They took effect rather quickly. By about the fourth day I was on them, I was already pretty much back to full range of motion, just a little bit of soreness. I still have a little bit of soreness even today, but that is why I am making this video and not a different video I wanted to be making, because just that small amount of time, not knowing what was going to happen, was enough to quite literally put me back into the worst time of my entire life. Dermatomyositis is not a disease that will ever go away. It's not a disease that's even super well understood. It's been around for a very long time, but it is so incredibly rare that there's just not a lot of studies done on it. There's no myositis awareness month. You're never going to see an NFL player wearing a ribbon for me. And because of that, it's just something I sort of have to live with forever. And there's no cure for it. There's just treatments for the things it causes. And I've been told that, yes, it will flare up again eventually, but I don't know what that looks like. And so when my shoulder starts hurting and I start losing motion in my arm again, I don't know how bad it's going to get. So I just kind of shut down for a little bit. A lot of people have asked me if I'm doing better now that they've seen me again. For the entire year and a half that I was dealing with literally everything before I even could really say that I'd started to get better, I basically didn't see any of my friends or family. My parents would come to visit me. Some of my close friends would come to visit me, but I couldn't go out. I couldn't visit my relatives. I didn't even want to. I just didn't want to be seen. I felt disgusting. This rash on my face that was just constantly peeling, my hair that had to be shaved off because I couldn't wash it because I couldn't wash my own hair. My clothes that just suddenly didn't fit because I'd lost 30 pounds from not eating for 3 weeks. I just couldn't see anyone. I couldn't do it. So now that I've started going out again and finally getting to visit my family and visit my friends again, a lot of people have asked me if I'm doing better. And the answer I give them is, I'm not better, but I am doing better. My disease won't go away. I will not become cured anytime soon. There will never be a cure. I will continue working towards getting back to where I was, but I don't know that I ever actually will. But I will do every exercise. I will make every appointment. I will see every doctor. I will do everything I am supposed to do In 10 years, whether I'm better or not, I will at least be able to say I did everything that I needed to do. But at least right this minute, I am doing better. I'm not better, but I am doing better. And as weird as it is to say, tendonitis in my shoulder was like a godsend. It just made me feel better. It made me feel better knowing that I wasn't going to have to go through what I went through again. I never really wanted to make this video. I never really wanted to put to recording any of this, any of what I went through. There's no real silver lining to it. There's nothing to learn. There's nothing good to take from this. It's a year and a half of the worst day of my life, followed by trying to put the pieces back together. But I also felt like I just needed to say it. For the few who will see it, for those last few that followed me from over 10 years ago, even. I felt like you should know what has happened, and that I'm thankful to be even able to make this video, that I'm even still around. I will continue to work on the things I need to work on to get better, and I will continue to try and make my YouTube channel better to make it worth actually watching these videos. But if I disappear for a little bit, please understand it just might be that things have gotten a little hard again, and I just needed to take a little time. But know that I will be back. That time is all I need. Because I am going to continue working. I am going to continue getting better. And also, just take this from me. Eat whatever the fuck you want to eat. It doesn't matter how unhealthy it is. It's way better to eat and be unhealthy than to not be able to eat and be healthy. Eat the burger, die young. Trust me, it's way better. If you want to read anything else about dermatomyositis, I will put a link to the Mayo Clinic article on it in the description. Unfortunately, there's not a lot of information out there about it. When I had nothing to do but read about my disease, articles were few and far between. There's not much to be learned, but if you're interested, it will be down there. And if you watched this entire thing, which I will not be editing, because I want you to know exactly how I felt while I was recording this. Thank you. This has been the Pink Reaper, signing out.